Okay, so let me make this a little bit bigger so everyone can see it. This is the rubric for the Common Core assignment. So it looks a little different from the ones we've had before. And the Common Core is going to evaluate the student learning objectives. Okay, and this is mostly for our assessment for SACs and for the assessment cycle, which is 3 years long. Okay, but these are the student learning objectives we're looking at. And these percentages may not mean a whole lot to you. Up here is where the points are. So this entire assignment is 50 points. So in other words, the way to get 10 points out of each category and score the full 50 points is by making sure that you're mastering these student learning objectives. Okay, so we'll start with the first one. Can you consider critically and state clearly the issue or problem, delivering all relevant information? Okay, so this is, did you answer the prompt? Did you answer all the questions in the prompt? Did you use evidence? Okay. Student learning objective 2.2, student will provide a clear and central message, thesis, statement, or argument. So this is pretty cut and dry, right? Did you have a thesis? Was it clear? Okay. Did you support the thesis? The third one, student learning objective 2.6, how's your grammar, right? How's your language? So skillfully control syntax and use proper mechanics. This is all about, those English mechanics, graceful language, skillfully communicate, clarity and fluency, virtually error-free, right? And this is where proofreading is come in really big. And for example, if Word puts a double blue line or puts any kind of line underneath it, check that out because the different colors mean different things. I think blue is like grammar, green is spelling, red is something else like a fragment. Okay, so run it through those spell checks and make sure that you get your full points out of that one. That's an easy one. All right, student learning objective 5.1. Student will identify a situation in which ethical issues are present. So this is citations. Do you have a bibliography page? Did you use footnotes where you needed them? Okay, and again, all this is going to be done through Chicago Manual of Style. There's the quick guide already on Blackboard. There's also the link that's under the assignment instructions. Okay, so make sure you get your sources. And student learning objective 6.6 will demonstrate awareness of how social, political, or economic structures empower, marginalize, or oppress others. Okay, so this is what we're going to look at here is, did you understand, the different political platforms, right? Because we're talking about Federalists versus anti-Federalists. Also, when we talk about the component of slavery, because that definitely oppresses others, right? So were you able to provide evidence and understanding of the platform, the different parties' views on slavery, their views on each other, and you're going to look at also how the Anti-Federalists wanted that Bill of Rights, because the Bill of Rights sets out all the individual rights that essentially can't be taken away, which would empower oppressed people, in theory, right? They blaringly omit the enslaved people. But this is that component, okay? So this is where you're going to rack up some points there. Did you correctly describe, answer the prompt about how each side viewed slavery, and did you evaluate, the contributions of the Anti-Federalists, why they wanted the Bill of Rights, and what that meant? Okay. Do you guys have any questions over this rubric? Or the assignment really at all? Okay. Where's my thing? There it is. I'll stop sharing that real quick. All right, and I'm going to, since we're done with that, close that out and pull up our content. Okay. So last time we got to the Declaration of Independence, correct? Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. All right, so just to kind of recap, we have met in the Second Continental Congress. We've sent out the Olive Branch petition to King George. Meanwhile, Lexington and Concord happen. We meet again to decide, what all is going to go from here on. And we create a committee to write up the Declaration of Independence. Now, Thomas Jefferson is your main writer, as in most group work. He does most of the work, right? One person does most of the work. So Thomas Jefferson brings this to the Second Continental Congress and to meet the Congress to meet again. And sorry, they want a bunch of edits to it. So he's forced to make edits, and they ratify it and sign it and declare it on July 4th. Did we discuss the signatures? Yes? No? You don't think so? Okay. So, no. All right, let's go back and look at that real quick. So I'm going to pull up this and okay. So again, this is a Declaration of Independence, and you look here. So just kind of on a side note of that, why do we have a Declaration of Independence? Because the colonists at the time realized the gravity of the situation. They are rebelling or declaring their independence or trying to move towards independence from the largest empire in the world. And at Lexington and Concord, we celebrate it's the shot heard around the world. Everyone is watching what is going on here. And the reason for that is either A, they are an empire and they want to see how these colonies measure up to the empire. They are also looking at whether or not these colonies can win, and if that would provide other empires, say the Spanish or the French, a chance at weakening the English and reconquering some of their territory in North America. The other colonies in the world are looking at this in an effort to see, again, how did these colonies measure up? How did they do it? Are they successful? Maybe we could be successful, right? So this is where, you put this into all of that perspective, and you have these colonists, most of which are very reticent, means they're very stressed about what's happening here. And by declaring their independence, they realize that there's no going back. So that's why they kind of wait a long time before they officially move to this plan of action. And so the Declaration of Independence is written and declared, issued out, read in all of the towns in an effort to bring people to their side, to their way of thinking, and also to show the world that they're not just doing this willy-nilly, right? They're not just doing this because they think it's a good idea. They're doing this for several reasons, and these reasons they've set out have legal basis. Right? So they're trying to legitimize their cause. And this is actually followed by several other colonies in the history of the world, including but not limited to Vietnam in the 20th century when they tried to declare their independence. They also have a Declaration of Independence. So a lot of people copy this. And so you have here Thomas Jefferson again writing very famous language. We hold these truths to be self-evident. But this is your reason right here. The first paragraph is kind of like your thesis statement. This is why we're doing this, and here's why. Okay? And so when you look through, you see he has refused to assent to laws. He is King George III. Okay? So all of these are like the most famous Dear John letter in history, right? We're breaking up you because of all of these reasons. And you go down to the bottom and you have all of these signatures, okay? Most people don't pay much attention to that, but again, if we did, I'm sorry, Imogen, if we did go over these signatures, I apologize, but it's really important because they're identifying themselves as rebels. And if they're caught, they will be charged with treason, which is a very serious crime. If you are charged and found guilty of treason, you will be drawn and quartered. That's a treason. That's a traitor's death. Also, something called a writ of attainder will be signed against your family, meaning that your family will be designated as a traitor's family. They will lose all property, all monetary ventures. They will be stripped of almost everything, and they will be penniless and forced to start over again. And they will not have very many legal rights because their name will be tarnished, right? Because they were someone in their family was designated as a traitor. Now, drawn and quartered is a punishment that is very gruesome. It's also very medieval, right? They hang you, but they don't hang you in a way that will break your neck. They strangle you until you're almost dead, but then they relieve you, take you down. And here comes a really gross part. They cut you open, take all your insides out, demonstrate that to the audience, if there is an audience there, which most of the time there is. They will cut your heart out. They'll castrate you if you're male. At this point, you're dead, right? And then they will quarter your body. They will cut off your limbs and cut up your body into quarters and bury you in separate, all separate pieces. Now, this is obviously gruesome, but it's meant to be gruesome and in a way to keep people from being treasonous, right? To try and influence people not to do that. In addition, when you're buried in that manner, you cannot be given a Christian burial. You cannot be buried in a cemetery. So it has long-ranging effects, which is why it's important we talk about this, because these men signed their name to this document and essentially signing their death warrant, because now the king has a list of people that are actively rebelling against him. And this is, of course, where Benjamin Franklin says, "Gentlemen, if we don't hang together, we will surely hang separately." And then, of course, John Hancock, if we haven't talked about that, he signs his name the biggest, most legibly, and, of course, says, in response to questions about that, well, I want to make sure they know how to spell my name for my death warrant. So everyone knew the gravity of this at the time. It also means that when they read it out in public, because this goes through all 13 colonies, all of them signed, the public will realize that their colony has signed on to this, their delegates that they have elected as representatives have signed on to this, and effectually they are at war with Great Britain. Okay? So, important document, but it also doesn't mean you have won the war by any means, right? It just means you've declared your independence. So, where does that go, right? Where do we go from there? So we'll start here at the beginning, right? We talked about common sense, and that's going to fund things. The British are going to move quickly. They will evacuate Boston, realizing after Lexington and Concord they cannot hold Boston. They do move into New York in large numbers. Excuse me, there's a small battle in New York. Washington is defeated and forced to flee in the middle of the night. It's called the Battle of Brooklyn, through an old Native American trail to get out of there. And we're coming towards the end of 1776, right? The Continental Congress elects George Washington as commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. It also gives donations for funding for this army. As we said, Thomas Paine gives all the profits from the pamphlet Common Sense to the Continental Army, but they are not funded very well. And this is a constant issue for George Washington throughout the Revolutionary War, is funding. How can he get his people taken care of? Okay, so volunteers of the Continental Army have contracts, and at the end of the year, they're usually for 1 year, at the end of the year, they have the option to re-enlist or to go home. No one's forced them against their will to fight in the Revolutionary War. So Washington is up against a wall really here because he needs a win, right? He's only seen defeat. It's coming up on Christmas, and he doesn't want anything. Guys are mumbling. They're talking about going home. They don't have very much to eat. They didn't bring winter clothes, right, etc. So he comes up with this idea about a surprise attack, okay? And the British were owed quite a bit of money by the county of Hesse, or the Dominion of Hesse, which is in Germany, by the Germans. And so in lieu of paying off that debt, Germany sends them 30,000 Hessian soldiers. So these are troops that are basically mercenaries. They're being paid by the German military to come and fight for the British in lieu of payment for an outstanding debt. And they are stationed in New Jersey at Trenton and Princeton. And so it's Christmas. And what do we know about Christmas, especially in the 18th century? It was a series of feast days. It wasn't just one day, right? It usually went on for 10, 12 days. And of course, Christmas Day being the biggest, right? The biggest day. It was also a religious holiday. And so there's a lot of food and drink going on, right? And the colonials, or the people everywhere of the 18th century, would put us to shame with their drinking capabilities. They drink more wine and ale every day than anybody in public would do today. In fact, most people would think these people must be alcoholics, but this was just normal. So they had a high tolerance already. Part of that is due to the fact that those things were more healthy to drink because the alcohol would kill bacteria, etc., than water. Okay, because we don't have a water system. There's no purification going on at the time. You can boil water, and some of them did do that, but alcohol was safer. So you have, first of all, very high tolerance. Second of all, Germans, like they are now, love to drink anyway. And it's Christmas, and everyone's partying. And the day after Christmas, early in the morning, George Washington leads his troops across the River Delaware into Trenton for a surprise attack. It happens so quick, the Hessians don't know what happened. Half of them are still asleep, passed out from drinking all night. The other half are barely awake, extremely hungover, probably still drunk. Okay, so there's virtually no resistance in Trenton. And it's an immediate resounding win for George Washington and the Continental Army. So again, he's going to change the game. He's going to change the way warfare is fought in the American Revolution because he realizes he really can't win an all-out war with the biggest empire in the world. He has to use these tactics. So based on his resounding win at Trenton, he then secures Trenton and moves on to Princeton and does almost the same thing over the New Year holiday. So based on these two decisive victories, his soldiers don't leave. They renew their contracts. He's got 2 wins under his belt at the beginning of 1776. Okay. Yes, it's sneaky, but you got to do what you got to do, right? All right. So war in the North, which would be the New England states, is different from war in the South. Okay. War in the North, the British are going to focus mainly in the New York area. Their plan is to meet their troops up with those coming down from Canada, right? Well, they don't call it Canada yet, but those coming down from those territories that they took over, and forming kind of a pincher movement. And then once they combine their forces, they're going to move south and basically crush each colony as they move south. That's their plan. So there's some issues with that. But what does Washington do, George Washington? He decides to make winter camp at a place called Valley Forge in Pennsylvania. Can you just keep trying to rejoin because the audio goes in and if you rejoin, usually it fixes it. I'm sorry. All right, so Washington has decided to make camp, winter camp at Valley Forge in Pennsylvania. This is the only time he's going to do this. During European wars and up until pretty much the American Revolution, there was a fighting season, and it usually lasted from spring to fall. So from the after the end of the frost to when it first starts getting cold again. Main reason for this: it's warm enough to move things such as armies, baggage trains, food, etc., and you're not bogged down in snow. And in winter quarters, you're warmer, right? Well, this is the first again and only time he's going to do this for several reasons. But he makes camp in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, and this is a bad idea. He doesn't have enough money to feed everybody. He doesn't have enough money to clothe everybody. Everybody's kind of left to their own devices in this camp. He's losing recruits. People are deserting and going home, saying, I can be warmer at home. I have a bed at home. I can make a fire there and be warm in my home and come back in the spring. So he has people leaving. He's not getting a whole lot of new recruits for the year 1777, so he's kind of in a bad way. Enter Mr. Wilhelm von Steuben. Steuben is from Prussia, which is the eastern portion of Germany and what's now Poland, right? So Eastern Europe. And he's a very accomplished, experienced military commander, but he's most probably homosexual. And while this means nothing, but in the 18th century, it meant a lot to especially those in military quarters and to the government. A lot of them are really controlled by religions at the time and very homophobic. So he leaves Prussia and comes to the United States to fight in the American Revolution to try and avoid bad press and really being outed. There is some documentation and some letters that went back and forth that he was having a relationship with one of his subordinates, so like one of his clerks while in Prussia. So he leaves Prussia and comes to the American Revolution to help George Washington based on principles he believed in this revolution, but also to run away from some bad press. And so he comes and brings with him a wealth of knowledge and technology. And his first kind of influence is that they have to rework the entire camp. He said, you are setting these guys up for disease. And the main reason for that is because you have your latrines, which is where they go to the bathroom, next to where they're making food. He's like, that's a no-go, right? We got to separate these out. And he sets up a very orderly camp for that, which greatly reduces the number of illnesses. And he also says you need to be training these guys every single day, even if it's cold. Number one, it will keep them moving and help them keep warm. And number two, it will keep their morale up and the discipline. So he begins training them every day. He also says that, or brings with him the idea of inoculation from Europe. So inoculation is a rudimentary form of vaccination. And the issue here is smallpox, right? And as we know, diseases really take hold in places where there isn't a lot of sanitation, not a lot of hygiene, and people aren't healthy to begin with. And so this is what's kind of running through this camp. Because they're cold, because they're not moving around, they're not keeping busy, they're not getting enough to eat, right? They're not warm enough. Their immunity is low, and so smallpox begins to ravage the camp. And the way to inoculate someone is to give them live virus so that their body can build up immunity. And the way to do this with smallpox, if you know anything about smallpox, in fact, let me show you some images, hopefully. Show you what's happening. Here we go, right? Nice, yucky images for you, right? So these are just these pus-filled things. Oh, we're going to get off that because that's gross. So that's what smallpox looks like. So the way to inoculate yourself is to make a small cut usually on your upper arm, and to take some of the pus from somebody who has smallpox and rub it on the cut. This means that your body has now been infected with live virus, but a very small amount, and it will build up immunity to the disease. And this works very well. It pretty much saves most of the soldiers from smallpox in the camp. It eradicates most of the disease. And so we have von Steuben to thank for that. Morale is an issue, and coming into the fighting season of 1777, we see kind of this political stage take hold as well. The Continental Congress, especially Benjamin Franklin, realizes that we need support. Okay, and we go to Britain's enemies to get it. Okay, and the ones who are most boisterous about their opposition to England or Britain are the French. So he begins going to the French courts in Versailles in Paris and lobbying for money, troops, and the biggest thing they need is a navy, right? Because the British Navy is pretty hot. It is the largest in the world. So they're begging for French support, and the French, although their hatred for the English runs deep, are afraid of losing again to the British. They just lost the French and Indian War 15 years ago, right? So they need some kind of reassurance. They're also courting the Spanish. They want some Spanish support, and they'd like them to open up other theaters of war, meaning divert some of the British attention away. Now, Jamaica does this for them inadvertently. During this time, there is a large slave revolt in Jamaica. Okay, and again, Jamaica is the crown of the British Empire at this point. It makes more money than all the North American colonies combined. So they want to secure this island, right? And so they do divert quite a bit of the British Navy to go and help put down the slave revolt in Jamaica. So you have some assistance there, right? Caveat Miller, I know Blackboard's given a lot of people trouble. I am recording this session, so you should be able to view it later if you do get kicked out, okay? So again, if you get kicked out, I'm recording the session. You can go back and view it, okay? But I have your names in the chat, so you'll be marked present. Okay, so all this is going on, and the Battle of Saratoga in October of 1777 is very important, okay? The reason for that is it's a victory for the Continentals, okay? There are several losses, battles in the first part of 1777, but Saratoga is a win. In fact, let me pause right here and pull up your mind tab, because there is a map in your book. So, okay, going to full there. We're in chapter 6. I'm trying to show you a map of talked about that. All right, let's look at this. Okay. No. All right. So let me enlarge this. You can see it better. Okay. So here's Saratoga. That's October 1777, right? We've got these battles here, 1776, Princeton, Trenton, Germantown in October 1777, Valley Forge is there, Brandywine in September, August, right, of 77. So American victories are in blue, not too many of them, right? I mean, although this does look pretty good for us. Up here, Boston and Saratoga. Saratoga again is in New York, right? The state of New York. They're starting to call themselves states now. British victories are the red. Okay. These are all of the movements of the British Navy. Okay, so you have William Howe coming over here, ending in Boston. And Burgoyne is going to go up here in an attempt to bring down more troops from Canada. So again, they're in New York City. They're attempting to bring down their troops from Canada and meet up down here in New York and Connecticut, Boston, Pennsylvania area. Okay, so what does that mean for us? Again, Burgoyne hopes to meet Howe, and in Saratoga of 1777, it is a victory for Washington and the Continentals. Now, why is that important? Why is this one battle singled out? Because at the Battle of Saratoga, victory secures foreign support. Okay? And the French agree after the Battle of Saratoga to officially join the war effort in favor of the Patriots, in favor of the Continental Army. So they sign an official treaty in the turn of the 1777 to 1778. Burgoyne surrendered to Saratoga after, like I said, what's clearly going to be a victory for the Continentals. France signs the treaty and brings in Spain as a foreign ally as well. Now, Spain doesn't actually send troops. Spain agrees to do is send money and also open up other theaters of war. In other words, other places in which the British have to go and fight. So Spain begins opening up theaters of war in Holland. The French and the Spanish open up fights with the British in the Mediterranean, in Africa, in India, and the Caribbean. So now this is a global conflict. Okay, and by doing this, you're dividing and conquering, right? The British are forced to divide their armed forces and their navy amongst all these different places to secure their colonies and to keep the French and the Spanish at bay. Now, the British, again, are telling them before this, don't join in this. This is a British-only affair. This is like a civil war. This is a rebellion. We're going to put it down. If you support this rebellion, once we're done with them, we'll come after you. Okay? Which is why the French and the Spanish waited until this victory at Saratoga thinking, okay, these colonists have a chance at winning. And the French and the Spanish are hoping that if the colonists win, they will negotiate with them, maybe retaking some of their holdings in North America. And in essence, they're going to, lend them money and get that money back, hopefully with interest, right? So in 1778, things are looking really good for the Continentals. The war in the South, okay, so this is where things go a little differently. British victories in the cities, Savannah, Charleston in the Carolinas, Camden, right? And the general that is overseeing the entire war effort in the South is Cornwallis, okay? And you have American generals such as Francis Marion. They give him the nickname the Swamp Fox. Also, Greene and Morgan combine their forces to defeat Cornwallis throughout South Carolina. He's forced to flee to Yorktown, Virginia for the winter in 1779 to 1780. And Admiral Paul de Grasse is the leader of the French Navy that is going to come in support of the Continental Army. Okay, so again, the one thing that Continentals or the Americans lacked was a navy. So here comes the French Navy, Admiral Paul de Grasse, and to support and try and make breakthroughs in this blockade. The British Navy has effectively blockaded all of the 13 colonies. So in addition to being at war, it's very, very hard to get any kind of goods in and out of the 13 original colonies, unless you go through Florida by land, right? So by entering the fray, the British Navy is entering into combat naval warfare with the French, led by Admiral Paul de Grasse. Okay, Marquis Lafayette is a French nobleman who's actually been to the colonies, but he is also a leader in fighting with French troops among the Continental Army, in effect, against the British. Okay, and Comte de Rochambeau is also another leader of the French military that come. They're brought by the French Navy. They're able to land and reinforce troops. By 1780, turning into 1781, Cornwallis is surrounded, pretty much. The British troops that were in New York and Canada were unable to link up, and they were also unable to come and rescue Cornwallis, even though he really demands support. He's not given support. He can't get any. The British Navy are unable to reinforce him. The troops under Burgoyne and Howe are stuck in the north. They cannot bring reinforcements to him. And so in October of 1781, Cornwallis officially surrenders for the British at Yorktown, Virginia. Okay, so it's over. 1776 to 1781 is the years of the American Revolution. The British are just aghast by this. They are taken by complete surprise by the turn of events here. The French, of course, are in support of the American Continentals, but the war has ended. So the next question is, well, now what? Right? So now what happens? And the Treaty of Paris, they begin negotiations with that in France. The British send delegates over there. The American Continentals send delegates over there. Benjamin Franklin being one of them. John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and they come up with the Treaty of Paris of 1783. Now, it's important to note that there are two treaties of Paris. And apparently Paris is a really good place to sign peace agreements. The first is 1763, which is the French and Indian War. The second is 1783, which is the American Revolution. So these are one of those times where it's really a good idea to pay attention to those dates, okay, because they're two separate treaties. And what does the Treaty of Paris say? It signifies American independence. They are no longer a part of the British Empire. It designates the border with Canada, right? Great Britain gets to keep all of Canada, but those 13 colonies that were originally mapped out are going to remain independent. But Americans do gain fishing rights off of Newfoundland in Canada. Okay, so they can fish in the North Atlantic. And that's really important for trade, right? So how does this change things? And the British warned them, we'll be back. So how did this happen? The British are kind of forced to give up. Cornwallis is trapped. He surrenders. But the British are occupied in all those other theaters of war, so they're unable to really fight all on one place. They assume that they can finish up these other skirmishes and come back, which they do in the War of 1812. And also they know that they still have Canada. So they're not completely out of North America after the American Revolution. In 1777, they begin the Continental Congress begins talking about how are we going to create governments for these different colonies. And this is where they change from calling themselves colonies to states. They're now states, not colonies of the empire anymore. And it is ratified and completed by 1781. So in 1781, Articles of Confederation are done. They are set up as an early form of government for these United States, as they'll call themselves now, and the war is over. So some of the qualifications or some of the points from the Articles of Confederation are that it establishes a firm league of friendship. But again, this doesn't mean that colonies have to support one another. They don't have to come to each other's defense. It says that they are in a league of friendship. Each state retains its own sovereignty. So Virginia only makes laws for Virginia. Massachusetts only makes laws for Massachusetts, right? They cannot tax, and they cannot form an army. Let me take a break real quick. I'll be right back. Give me 1 second. Okay, my apologies. I'm back. All right, so Articles of Confederation are very weak. They cannot form an army together. There is no, the Continental Army has been disbanded. Everyone goes back to their own states. They rely on voluntary contributions to pay off the debt, right? Which, as we know, is not always good. And decisions passed by the Articles of Confederation or the Congress that meets once a year has to be agreed upon by 100%. So unanimous agreement. Nobody can vote against it. And as I'm sure you're aware, rarely does everybody agree on anything. Okay, 100%. So the Articles of Confederation are an early attempt at a government in the United States. It's not very successful because of its weaknesses. So let's go here. Now, African Americans, women, and Native Americans, how did they come into the war effort? And what impact do they have on this issue? So African Americans, most of those that do join the war effort are going to fight for the British. Okay, and a large reason for that is because of Lord Dunmar's proclamation. So he's going to gather a lot of support from the South enslaved people. Okay, not from the North, but from the South. Vermont actually outlaws slavery, as do Pennsylvania and New York. Okay, so following the end of the American Revolution, the beginning of the Articles of Confederation, each state has to create its own state constitution. And so Vermont, Pennsylvania, New York outlaw slavery. Many Native Americans in this effort are going to side with the British because of the Proclamation of 1763, which protected the interior from Europeans or colonists from taking their land. And they're tired of losing. Unfortunately, they lose this one too. Okay? And it doesn't bode well when there's a raid that goes on in New York and a family is killed, including a woman, Jane McRae. Now, it's pretty brutal in that the whole family, women and children, are killed, and she is scalped. Excuse me. Which, if you don't know, it just means that a piece of your hair is cut from your scalp, skin and all, right? And this is memorialized or used as propaganda throughout the northern states as anti-Native American, right? It breeds a lot of racism and discrimination because this makes national news, if you will, in the newspapers and the press at the time. And then we have, we'll get to Benedict Arnold in a minute. Abigail Adams, who's the wife of John Adams, argues that You should not forget the ladies. In other words, the ladies fought alongside them in the revolution in different ways. Were they in the field? No, but a lot of them were camp followers if they had no families. If they did have families, a lot of these women were left for 4 or 5 years to care for and maintain their families on their own. They had to continue their husband's businesses, they had to continue farming, and they had to have all of this while their husbands were out at war. In addition, you have the Daughters of Liberty, making sure that the boycotts were taken seriously. And they had to do without during the boycotts just like the men did. So her argument is they should be given equal rights. If you're going to base your revolution on principles of equality, then you should include the ladies, right? Adams, although agrees with her, cannot bring that to agreement in the in the convention, in the Congress when they meet. So kind of gives up on that. Camp followers on both sides. Again, these are people who served as nurses, cooks, people who hoarded the soldiers that fought in the war. And these were made up not just of women, but also of African Americans, okay, that supported the war effort on both sides, mostly on the British, but some on the American side. And in New Jersey, their state constitution gives women the right to vote. That's what suffrage is, the right to vote. Okay, so you have a lot of these states in their own constitutions actually practicing what they preached. Outlawing slavery, giving suffrage to women. Vermont, Pennsylvania will also give votes to women with this. Now, Benedict Arnold. Benedict Arnold is an interesting story for the American Revolution. It's a story of what happens to traitors, right? Benedict Arnold is a good friend of George Washington. And he's been given, in the early years of the American Revolution, a outpost of West Point, what's now West Point, okay, which is along the border of Canada. And because he's so trusted, he's basically in charge of keeping the border with Canada secure, not allowing large amounts of troops to come into New York and the other colonies. He is an experienced veteran of the war already. He's been wounded in a battle at Saratoga. But when he gets appointed up to West Point, he feels as though he hasn't been given his due for his fighting. And his ego is a little hurt, okay? Although he was given this very prestigious command. But he feels finished. And his wife is a loyalist, meaning loyal to the crown, as well as her family. They're a pretty wealthy family. They remain loyal to the British. So she's constantly working on him to see if he will turn coat, right, and come to the side of the loyalists. And eventually he does. The British are able to turn him. He's given 30 pounds and 30,000 pounds sterling, like $30,000, but 30,000 pounds sterling by the British, and he turns over all of the battle plans and plans for the Northern Theater of War and a way to get from Canada into the colonies for the British. So quite a traitor, right? How he's found out is Washington decides to go visit his friend, right? Again, they're buddies. And he actually takes with him Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton has come to North America originally to go to college, but then the war breaks out and he joins the Continental Army. And Hamilton quickly moves up the ranks to become quartermaster. So he's actually riding with Washington on this expedition, and they go to see Arnold, okay? And Arnold hears that they're coming, and he thinks that Washington knows what he's doing. Washington knows he's a spy. Loses his mind, right? He is freaking out. His wife says, just run. Just go to Canada. It's right across the river. I'll join you later. So he abandons his wife, goes to Canada, seeks sanctuary in Canada with the British. When Washington show up, he doesn't know what's going on. He wants to know where his buddy's at. He wants to, let's have breakfast, blah, blah, blah. Finds out that Arnold's run, and it begins to dawn on him what has happened, what has occurred. And he's devastated. And he writes in his own journals, he can't believe this man betrayed him. And there's just a lot of pain there because this was his friend. And his wife, Arnold's wife, just becomes hysterical, pretends to be a little crazy, says that, her husband abandoned her, blah, 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 don't hurt her. Washington, of course, is not going to hurt her. And he sends her across the river with safe passage to Canada to be reunited with her husband. So at this point, he realizes the North is compromised, got to redo his entire strategy, which he does, and eventually, they win the war. Benedict Arnold and his family in Canada and British Canada, he thinks they're going to be welcomed with open arms, but they're viewed with suspicion, right? He's not given any commands in the British Army. He's kind of seen as a pariah because once a traitor, always a traitor. Why are they going to look at him as anything other than that? If you're willing to betray your countrymen and your good friend, what makes us think that you're going to be loyal to us? Right? So the British used him. And he is not really ever accepted anywhere after that. He and his family stay in British Canada and become kind of pariahs for, in a modern term, for snitching. Right? So that is, we already did that. Sorry. The end of the American Revolution. I'm going to go ahead and stop there today. We'll wrap up chapter 6 on Friday as well. We'll have that discussion. Do you guys have any questions for me? Okay. Make sure you put your name in the chat. And I'm going to end class. Yes. Yes.
So you said there's a discussion on Friday, right? This Friday?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just want to let you know that most likely I will not be here for class on Friday because I got to go to a funeral. But at least I know now that I have a discussion, so I don't miss it. So.
Okay. Well, you are going to miss it because it's in class, but email me, and I will send you something you can do instead.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Any other questions? Concerns?
Do you think that really quickly you can go over not like every step, but like just to refresh what we're supposed to do for the Declaration and for the Constitution?
Yeah, I can do that. Also remember that I'm going to stop recording.